There's a specific moment that happens on an ordinary Sunday morning. The house is quiet. The coffee is made. Everything around you is exactly what you worked for. The house, the stability, the life that used to exist only in your head as something you were building toward. And you're standing in the middle of it, cup in hand, looking at all of it. And something is wrong. Not wrong in a way you can point to. Not wrong in a way anyone else would see. Just wrong in the way that certain silences are wrong. The kind that carry something underneath them that you haven't been able to name yet. You should feel it by now. The arrival. The relief of having gotten here. But what you feel instead is a quiet, sourceless emptiness that you've been pretending isn't there for longer than you want to admit. Nobody prepares you for this. Every conversation about success is about the getting, the discipline, the sacrifice, the grind, the moment of arrival. Nobody tells you what happens after the arrival. Nobody warns you that you can build the exact life you planned and stand inside it feeling like a stranger in someone else's house. The self-help industry has an entire library dedicated to how to get what you want. It has almost nothing to say about what happens when you get it, and it doesn't feel the way it was supposed to. And so you do what most people do. You assume something is wrong with you. You decide you're ungrateful, or broken, or that you need a new goal, something bigger, something further away, something that will finally produce the feeling that everything you've already built somehow didn't. You get very good at not sitting still with the question, because the question, if you let it fully form, is one of the most unsettling things a person can face. What if I spent years building a life that isn't actually mine? If that's where you are right now, stay here, because what we're about to cover is the part nobody talks about, and the people who find this content find it for a reason. Subscribe and keep close, because this channel goes where most won't. Here's what Carl Jung spent years trying to understand about the lives people build and the selves they build them with. When you're young, not just in age, but in the early chapters of your adult life, you construct a version of success based on what the world around you rewarded, what your parents celebrated, what your culture held up as a rival, what the people you admired seemed to have that you didn't. You absorb all of it unconsciously, and you build a map. And then you spend years, sometimes decades, navigating by that map with everything you have. The problem Jung identified is this: the map was never entirely yours. It was assembled from other people's definitions of a life well lived before you were old enough to know you were allowed to have your own. The ambition was real, the effort was real, the sacrifice was real. But the destination was chosen by a version of you that was still, in many ways, trying to earn something. Approval, safety, the sense of being enough. And when you finally arrive at the destination, you discover that the thing you were really looking for was never on the map at all. This is what Jung called the first half of life problem. The first half is about construction, building the structures that allow you to function in the world. Career, family, identity, security. These things matter. They are not nothing, but they are scaffolding. And at some point, the scaffolding is complete, and you realize you've been so focused on building the structure that you never asked what the structure was supposed to house. What was it all for? Not in a nihilistic way, not as a crisis, as a genuine question that the emptiness is asking you quietly, every Sunday morning when the house is still, and the coffee is warm and everything is exactly as planned. Think about what you gave up to get here, not the obvious sacrifices, those you can account for, those you made peace with along the way. Think about the quieter ones, the version of yourself you set aside because it wasn't practical. The interest you abandoned because it didn't fit the trajectory. The instinct you overrode because it pointed somewhere that didn't make sense on the map. The relationship you didn't pursue. The city you didn't move to. The thing you almost did that one time before you decided to be responsible. You made those choices. They were probably the right choices by the logic of the life you were building. But something in you registered every single one of them. And that something has been keeping a very quiet, very patient account. The emptiness you feel is not ingratitude. I want to say that clearly because it's the thing most people reach for first. The self-accusation that they should be grateful, that other people would kill for what they have, that feeling this way is a kind of moral failure. It isn't. Gratitude and emptiness are not opposites. You can be genuinely grateful for what you've built and still feel the ache of something missing that you can't locate on any shelf in the house you worked so hard to own. What you're feeling is not ingratitude, it's information. Before we go deeper, I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to sit with it before you scroll past. When you imagine the life you actually want, not the life you built, not the life that made sense, but the one that would feel like yours, what's the first thing that appears? Not the responsible answer, the real one. Drop it in the comments, because that answer is more diagnostic than anything else you could tell me about where you are right now. Here's what happens psychologically when you spend years navigating by a map that wasn't entirely yours. You develop what Jung called a false self, not a lie, not a performance, but a version of you that is genuinely functional and genuinely capable and genuinely committed to the life it's building. The false self isn't fake. It works. It delivers. It earns the respect of people whose respect matters. But it is constructed in response to external demands rather than internal truth. And the longer it runs, the more efficiently it operates, and the further it gets from the person it was originally built to protect. The person underneath the false self, the one who had instincts and hungers and a particular way of seeing the world before any of the building started, doesn't disappear. Jung was very clear about this. That person goes underground, into what he called the shadow. Not the dramatic shadow of repressed darkness that gets discussed in pop psychology, the quieter shadow of unlived life, the roads not taken, the selves not inhabited, the desires that had no place in the architecture of the life being built and so got filed away, quietly, indefinitely, with a note that said someday. The emptiness is the shadow speaking. It isn't telling you that you failed. It's telling you that something real was set aside for so long that it started to knock. If this is landing in a way that feels uncomfortably accurate, that's exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe if you haven't. We go deeper every week, and the people who stay are the ones doing the real work. And here's the thing about that knock that most people misunderstand. The first instinct when you feel it is to build something new, a new goal, a new project, a new achievement that will finally produce the feeling the last achievement didn't. You apply the only tool you've ever trusted, the building tool, to a problem that cannot be solved by building anything. You sign up for the challenge. You set the new target. You generate the new momentum. And it works for a while because momentum always feels like meaning when it's moving fast enough, until it stops. And there you are again. Sunday morning. Coffee, everything as planned. The knock, quieter this time but more insistent. There's a second trap that's even more seductive than building more, and it's the one that costs people years without them realizing it. You start optimizing what already exists. You upgrade the house. You refine the career. You improve the relationship. You take the vacation you always postponed. You treat the symptoms of the emptiness with better versions of the things that produced it. And this feels like progress because it involves movement and decision, and the sense that you're responding to the signal. But you're not going toward what the signal is pointing at. You're making the existing structure more comfortable to live in, without ever asking whether you're actually living in it at all. Jung watched this in patient after patient. The man who couldn't understand why the promotion felt hollow. The woman who renovated the house and felt nothing when it was finished. The couple who took the trip they'd been planning for years and came home feeling further apart than when they left. All of them responding to the right signal with the wrong tool. All of them building and optimizing when what was needed was something closer to archaeology. Going down rather than up. Finding rather than constructing. There's something else happening underneath all of this that almost never gets named directly. The life you built was also, in a very real sense, a message. A proof of something. You were sending a signal to your parents, to the people who doubted you, to a younger version of yourself who wasn't sure you could do it, to a world that has very specific ideas about what a successful person looks like. And for a long time, building the proof felt meaningful, because the message felt important. But at some point, the proof was complete. The message was sent, and you discovered that no one was reading it the way you needed them to, or that the people you most wanted to reach it couldn't receive it, or that receiving it didn't change what you needed it to change. And the life that was supposed to be the answer turned out to be a very well-constructed question. This is one of the things that makes this particular emptiness so hard to talk about. It isn't just about the life you built. It's about what you believed the life would do for you once it was built. The internal shift you were waiting for. The feeling of having finally arrived not just at the destination, but at the version of yourself who deserved to be there. And that feeling, the one that was supposed to come with the achievement, either didn't arrive at all, or arrived briefly, and then quietly left. And now you're standing in the proof with the message sent and the destination reached, and you're still waiting for something to shift inside that hasn't shifted yet. The Stoics understood something about this that is easy to misread. Marcus Aurelius was a man who had achieved everything Rome could offer a human being: power, legacy, respect, philosophical mastery. And his private journals, the ones he never intended anyone to read, are full of a man wrestling with exactly this question. Not the question of how to get more, the question of how to be present inside what already exists. How to inhabit his own life rather than administrate it from a safe distance. He kept writing to himself about attention. Not the attention required to build things, but the attention required to actually experience being alive while you are alive. This is the thing the building years train out of you. The capacity for presence. For your own life, as it is right now, to actually land. You become so skilled at deferring experience, at living in the next milestone, the next phase, the next version of the plan, that when the plan is complete and there is no next phase to defer to, you discover that you've been so far ahead of your own life for so long that you don't know how to be in it. The life you built is real. It's just that you've been living slightly to the left of it for years, managing it rather than inhabiting it. And the emptiness is not the absence of something you need to add. It's the presence of a self that has been waiting, with remarkable patience, to be let back in. Second question, and I want you to actually answer this one honestly before you move on. Is the life you're living the one you would choose right now, today, if you were choosing from scratch? Not the life that made sense 10 years ago. Not the life that other people in your position are supposed to have. Today, from scratch, with what you now know about who you actually are, there's no right answer. But there's a very honest one. Tell me in the comments. Here's where it gets complicated. Because the answer to the emptiness is not to burn the life down. That's the thing Jung found in patient after patient who reached this point. The first impulse is often the most destructive one. Leave the marriage, quit the career, move to another country, buy the motorcycle. Blow up the structure and see what survives. And sometimes, in extreme cases, some version of that is necessary. But most of the time, it isn't the structure that needs to change. It's the relationship to it. There's a distinction that matters enormously here, and almost never gets made in the conversation about midlife and meaning. There is a difference between a life that is wrong and a life that is unlived. A life that is wrong needs to be changed. A life that is unlived needs to be inhabited. And most people who feel what you're feeling are not living the wrong life. They are living the right life at the wrong depth. They are on the surface of something that has more to offer than they've been willing to go down into. Because going down requires a kind of courage that the building years never asked for. The building years rewarded external movement, progress, output, accumulation, achievement. The second half of life, Jung's term for what begins when the construction phase completes, asks for something different. Internal movement. The willingness to go toward the things that have been waiting rather than away from the discomfort of finding them. The courage to ask what is actually mine here, and what was I carrying for someone else. This is not a comfortable process. Jung never suggested it would be. He called it individuation. The lifelong process of becoming genuinely, fully, distinctly yourself. Not the self the map described, not the self the system rewarded. The self that was always underneath the construction, waiting for the construction to finish so there would finally be room. Most people resist this process, not because they're afraid of who they'll find, but because of what the finding requires them to acknowledge. That some of the choices that got them here were made for the wrong reasons. That some of the things they're most proud of were built partly to impress people who weren't even watching. That the life they constructed as proof of something never actually proved it, because the thing they were trying to prove can't be proven externally, only settled internally. And settling it internally means going back to the place where the question first formed and sitting with it long enough to hear the real answer. That is not quick work. It doesn't happen in a weekend retreat or a productivity system or a conversation with someone who tells you what you want to hear. It happens in the slow, unglamorous process of paying attention to your own life, to what actually feels like yours and what feels performed, to what you do because you want to, and what you do because stopping would require an explanation, to the moments when something in you relaxes completely and the moments when something in you is always slightly braced. The emptiness is not an ending, it is an opening. The most significant opening most people ever get, arriving usually in the middle of a life that looks complete from the outside, precisely because the external work is done, and the internal work is finally allowed to begin. What Jung found in people who moved through this, who didn't flee back into frantic achievement or blow up everything they'd built, was something that surprised even him. They didn't find a different life. They found their life, the one they'd been living, seen from the inside for the first time. The same house experienced as home rather than as evidence of arrival. The same relationships experienced as genuine contact rather than as components of a functional structure. The same work, done from a place of actual choice rather than accumulated momentum. The life doesn't change as much as the person inside it does. And that change, the shift from living your life as an achievement to living it as an experience, is quiet and undramatic, and the most significant thing that can happen to a person. There is one more thing Jung found that I think deserves to be said directly, especially if you're somewhere in the middle of this, and the process feels less like opening and more like losing ground. The people who move through this transition well are not the ones who figure it out fastest. They're the ones who become willing to tolerate ambiguity for long enough to let something real emerge. The building years trained you for certainty, for clear targets, measurable progress, defined outcomes. The internal work asks for something almost opposite. You're looking for something you can't describe yet, using tools you've never had to develop, in territory that has no map because you're the first person who has ever been exactly you in exactly this moment of your life. Of course, it's disorienting. Of course, there are days when the emptiness feels like proof that you've made a mistake somewhere, rather than like the signal it actually is. But here is what I keep coming back to, and what Jung came back to again and again in the cases that moved him most. The people who feel this are not the ones who failed to build something meaningful. They are the ones who built seriously enough and cared enough about their own interior life, that the gap between the external achievement and the internal experience became impossible to ignore. The emptiness is a sign of sensitivity, not failure. It means something in you is still paying attention, still waiting, still capable of wanting something real. That is not nothing, that is everything. Here's what I want you to actually take from this before you close the tab. The fact that you feel empty is not a sign that you built the wrong life. It's a sign that you built far enough that the building is done. And the part of you that knows there's more, not more to acquire, more to inhabit, has been trying to get your attention for a while now. The emptiness is that part. It's not your failure, it's your signal. You don't have to burn anything down. You don't have to make a dramatic choice. You don't have to explain to anyone why you feel the way you feel when everything looks fine from the outside. You just have to be willing to start asking different questions. Not what do I need to build next, but what have I been standing next to without ever actually entering? The life you built is waiting for you to live in it, not manage it, Not optimize it, not use it as evidence of something. Just live in it from the inside, as the person you actually are underneath everything you constructed to get here. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. And it starts usually on an ordinary Sunday morning with a cup of coffee, in the middle of a silence that finally has enough space in it to tell you the truth. If you know someone who has built everything they said they would, and seems fine, but something is quietly off, send this to them. Not with explanation, just the link. They'll know why. Subscribe if this is the kind of depth you want to keep going. We go here every week. And if you're ready to do the actual work of finding out who you are underneath what you built, our guide. True self-discovery walks you through exactly that process. The link is below. The life you actually want to inhabit has been there the whole time. It just needs you to finally show up for it.